Well, from time to time, some of you have asked me how I go about preparing my sermons each week. Many of you know that our scripture readings each Sunday come from the Revised Common Lectionary. It's the lectionary that most Christian churches around the world follow. And I absolutely love that. I love on any given Sunday around the world, most Christian churches are putting their focus on the very same readings. Now, what I do is every Monday morning, I take the gospel reading from that upcoming Sunday's lectionary, and I begin to pray with it. And then that gospel passage kind of lives with me throughout the week, not only in my morning prayer time, but in my thoughts throughout the week. It kind of becomes like my spiritual food for the week. And I'm always so amazed to see how God nourishes me spiritually through the beautiful gospel stories of Jesus. In the past 3 weeks, these resurrection stories have really fed me spiritually. I think they're some of the most beautiful stories in the Bible. I mean, who among us doesn't want to experience what those first disciples did? Who among us doesn't want to experience the presence of the risen Christ in our midst? The presence of the divine love, which calls us by name and says to us, "You are holy and precious in my sight. You are my beloved." Now, notice in these resurrection stories the past few weeks, the disciples don't recognize Jesus at first. The person they're talking to doesn't look like the Jesus they remembered. But when Jesus calls them by their name, they have an aha moment. So if you remember, Mary Magdalene, outside the tomb, she thought she was talking to the gardener. But when the gardener says, "Mary," her eyes are opened and she realizes it's Jesus. And then if you were with us last Sunday, remember Thomas doesn't believe. But Jesus appears and says, "Thomas, come, touch me. Put your hand in my hand. Feel my side." And we see the same thing in today's story. Jesus calls Simon Peter by his name, not just once, but 3 times. The thing that moved me the most when I was praying with this gospel passage this week was the setting. Simon Peter went back to where he was 3 years ago, to when he first met Jesus. If you remember in that story, Jesus was calling together his first disciples. He's just beginning his ministry, and he wants to call together a team. So he goes there to the sea, and he talks to fishermen. Simon was among those. And he says, "Leave your boats and your nets on the shore. Come and follow me." And they do. Now, back then, 3 years prior, Simon Peter was just Simon, a fisherman. But in the 3 years he was following Jesus, he and Jesus became so close that Simon became like Jesus' right-hand man. And that's why Jesus said, "I'm going to give you the name Peter," because Peter means rock. And he says to him, "You are going to be the rock on which I will build my church." Now, I want to interject something here because I want to make sure this is clear. This statement has been confusing to many Christians. So I want to be clear, Jesus was not trying to build a new church. Jesus was not trying to establish a new organized religion called Christianity. He wasn't instructing Peter to go out and build little structures with steeples. The word that is used in the Bible for church is a Greek word, ecclesia. And what it means literally is to call people out. He's really instructing Peter to go out into the neighboring towns and to call people out of their homes, to form an assembly of people, to have a new way of life, a new way of living and loving and being. And so what he's saying to Simon Peter is, you are going to be laying the groundwork, the foundation for continuing my teachings. And of course, Peter would go on to do exactly that. But do you remember where Peter was when Jesus was arrested? He was hiding in fear. And when the authorities found him, they said, "Where's your friend? Where's Jesus? We're here to arrest him." And what does Peter say? Who? Jesus? Never heard of him. Don't know that guy. And Peter told the authorities that not once, but 3 times. And that's why when I was praying with this resurrection story this week, I actually got moved to tears, because I thought Peter has returned to where he was 3 years prior, before he even met Jesus. And I imagined what he must have felt like. He must have felt so shameful, so full of guilt that he denied and rejected his friend, so sad that his friend had been crucified. He must have felt so dismayed, so hopeless. And so what does he do? He tries to go back to the way of life he had before he knew Jesus. He tries to go back to being a fisherman. But notice, it doesn't work. He can't catch any fish. When we follow this way of love, this way of life, this way of being, we can no longer go back to the person we were before. Notice what happens. Jesus appears on the shore, and he says, "Simon, Peter, son of John, do you love me?" And did you notice he didn't just say it once, he said it 3 times. And that was on purpose, because he said it once for each time that Peter rejected him. Jesus really wanted Peter to know, I love you. I'm not coming back to scold you for rejecting me. I'm letting you know that I am with you always and in all ways. I think that's so beautiful. And what it does, it reminds us that the presence and the power of the risen Christ is there for us as well in our times of shame and despair and hopelessness. That the power and the presence of the risen Christ can transform us with that love and forgiveness. Now, Peter, of course, would go out and do as Jesus said, "Go feed my sheep. Go be a fisher of men." And so what does that mean for us as progressive Christians? We heard a little bit about that in our Words of Integration and Guidance this morning that Chris Glazer wrote. What does it mean for us as progressive Christians to evangelize? Are we supposed to go out into the world and catch people for Christ? Are we to bring them into our church and convert them? Is that what it means? Well, as I said, Jesus did not want us to convert people to a religion. He didn't. Jesus was a Jew. He was a very devout Jew. He loved being Jewish. He participated in all the Jewish rituals and traditions. So if you want to go and convert people to the religion of Jesus, well, then convert them to Judaism. Jesus never heard of Christianity. Okay? Jesus wanted us to convert ourselves. Now, if you were with us last Sunday, I was talking about how Christians today want to go out and convert people because they're so certain that they have the answer. Christianity is the only way. And they're so certain of it that they want to go out and convert people to save their souls. My friend, we do not need to go out and save people. We don't. People do not need saving. People need to be loved. We need to go out and love people unconditionally, which means exactly the way they are. That's how we evangelize. We are going out and loving people the way Jesus loved. We are following his way of life. That's what he wanted us to do, not form a new religion, not form churches with steeples, but to love unconditionally, to forgive one another, to serve one another, especially the least of these. That's why this ecclesia is gathered every single week. You know, I love that song that we sometimes sing at church that says, "Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel the mighty power and the grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of God is in this place." It's so true. You feel it when you're in this church. And that's why we invite people to come to Douglas UCC. That's why we say, come and see what's happening here. It's not because we're trying to convert them. It's not because we're trying to save their souls and ensure their place in heaven. We want to extend to them this extravagant welcome, this inclusive love, to let them know that they are holy and precious in God's sight. That's what it means for us as progressive Christians to evangelize, to share that good news with the world. Now, in recent years, we keep seeing articles that are written by so-called experts about how the Christian church is dying. All the people are leaving churches and the church is dying. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that the Christian church needs to change if it's going to continue to survive. And I recently read a really wonderful book which is called Rescuing Jesus. And it was written by Deborah Lee. And in that book, she says this: "I don't see the church disappearing. I see the church changing radically. Churches that are able to invite and include and celebrate the diversity of humanity, those are the ones that will survive. The ones that can't do that, the ones that continue to make church about boundaries, about who's in and who's out, those churches are going to become relics." I love that, and I believe that. And so, my friends, in this season of Easter, the season of new life, let us be people who continue to extend that inclusive welcome, to draw the circle or to draw the net ever wider, so that we can welcome those 153 different species, different types of people to our church, to include everyone. Because when we put our focus on that oneness, our church will not only continue to survive, we will thrive. So let us spiritually feed ourselves and feed one another so that we can bring about the kingdom of heaven right here on earth. Namaste.